Elseworlds. What do you know about Elseworlds?
I know I know very little, but I know it's this idea that parallel universe taking place in a different time, essentially. Like same, it's what we've been talking about, Batman, but in the 1880s Gotham. And that's like the TLDR. I also know that
Yeah.
this Gotham by Gaslight was the first of the Elseworlds. I saw that in a bunch of references.
Yeah, so that's why I want to talk about it a little bit on this episode, is because it's so closely tied in people's minds to Gotham by Gaslight. Elseworlds were an imprint of books that take place outside of continuity, similar to Marvel's What If you're familiar with that.
Mm-mm.
Sorry, what?
No, I'm not familiar with Marvel's.
Oh, okay. Same thing.
Cool.
I only bring it up in case people do know. There was a TV show called What If that is the same thing. Before Crisis on Infinite Earths, there was a similar imprint called Imaginary Stories, but Elseworlds is the one that's sort of post-crisis, and it ran from 1989 to 2003. So not crazy long, a little over a decade. And in later Elseworlds books, there was a paragraph written by Dennis O'Neil that would run in every single one of them. I don't know if you want to read that graph, Brian.
Sure. In Elseworlds, heroes are taken from their usual settings and put into strange times and places, some that have existed and others that can't, or couldn't, or shouldn't exist. The result is stories that make characters who are as familiar as yesterday seem as fresh as tomorrow.
Yeah, and then on the cover of all these books, they had this logo that went with the imprint. I don't know. Do you want to kind of describe that?
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of looks like the Polaris star that, like, I think those cars, Polestar. It's really similar to that. It's kind of a shooting star angular graphic with the Elseworlds wrapped around it. I would say kind of like the Chicago Cubs C, but mirror image. So it's just the Elseworlds wraps around in a circle, and then that star, the tail of that shooting star, is in the gap there.
Yeah. So this imprint, Elseworlds, Gotham by Gaslight, is often cited as the first Elseworlds book. Though that's interesting, it didn't ship with the imprint logo on its cover in the original iteration, nor in any reprints, as far as I'm aware. I didn't see it on any reprints, so I don't know why people say it's an Elseworlds.
Interesting.
Brian Augustine is often the person who's saying this on the record, and he's saying it's sort of retroactively the first Elseworlds book. So I believe basically what people are saying is that it's spiritually the first one, right? Like that what happened was this was a really big success, and that's what made editorial sort of go off and commission all these other books to do the same thing. They're like, do Gotham by Gaslight, but with these other characters or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's tons of DC graphic novels that were released under this label that you might have heard of, like Kingdom Come is a really famous one. Superman Red Sun is a big, famous, popular one. Batman Holy Terror. The list goes on and on and on. It was something that was really popular for a time, but then they stopped doing. I'm not sure why, if it just stopped selling well, if it didn't have the lure that it did before. Probably had to do with change in leadership, that happened at DC around the time. But one of the things that's happened recently is that James Gunn has adopted this concept to explain movies that take place outside of his new DCU. So are you familiar with the James Gunn situation?
Yeah, I am. Basically, they named him in charge of making the DCU actually work well together and be cohesive. But they were already tied up with at least The Batman as I think a trilogy for Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves. And so that Batman is not going to be the Batman in James Gunn's DCU. And they said, nope, that's totally fine. That just takes place in a different universe. But we're still coming out with those movies because people like them. And that's my TLDR.
Yeah, in the Comic-Con presentation, they literally called them Elseworlds. So the Matt Reeves Batman movies are now Elseworlds. The same is true of the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movies. It's like, that's not going to be the Joker in the DCU. So now that's what they're calling Elseworlds. And supposedly they're going to, like, before the movie starts, like, they're going to have a bumper, just like it would say, like, Marvel Studios or whatever. It'll say Elseworlds so that people know that it's another sort of like different thing on the side. It is worth noting that James Gunn is in charge, and he's been in charge now for a couple of years, but no movies that he is responsible for have come out yet. So like the recent ones like Blue Beetle and like Black Adam and all that kind of stuff, those aren't James Gunn movies. The Flash is not his. And I think the Aquaman 2 is yet to come. Like it's coming out soon, and he's not responsible for that either. Yeah. I think we're getting a Superman movie first, or Batman Brave and the Bold. I don't know. But they're not like, they're 2025, something like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, because James Gunn's sort of like digging it up, I assume because we don't know for sure, digging it up and saying like, hey, we're going to use this Elseworlds imprint for the movies at New York Comic Con this year, which was like in October, which is this month, but the month before this episode comes out.
Yeah, the month of recording.
Yes. Announced that they're bringing Elseworlds imprint back for new comics. So including a new sequel to Gotham by Gaslight.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There will be a third Gotham by Gaslight book.
Cool.
Yeah. Obviously not written by Brian Augustine because he's no longer with us. But
yeah.